Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. If Joanna and Bianca are in the room, I've met you last night. I came to Warsaw yesterday afternoon. I met them last night. I asked them, what should I speak about today? As when I learned yesterday it was 5,000 people, I started to get a little bit nervous that my speech might be dry, boring, and uninteresting, given that I'm a banker. So they gave me the feedback last night, so I spent today rewriting my speech. So if you like it, thanks to Bianca and Joanna, the organizers of the conference today. I asked Joanna, who was introduced me there a couple of minutes ago, what are the themes of the conference so far? And she said, opportunity, diversity, and empowerment. And I would say those three words resonate with me a lot, given that I've sat in the back a lot today listening to the speakers. I was particularly inspired by the lady from Cisco and the lady from Citigroup. If you listen to them, she said, have a plan, take risk, and be kind to yourself. They're words that I use a lot in how I think about my career and my journey at Goldman Sachs. The lady from Citi said, if I can do it, you can do it. She also said, banking is a great place to be an engineer and have a software career. So a lot of the other speakers resonated with me, and some of the things and topics I'm going to cover with you today will bear that out. So, Dermot McDonogh, I'm COO for Goldman Sachs in EMEA. I've been at Goldman Sachs for 25 years. I joined in July 10th, 1994. And Goldman Sachs this year celebrates its 150th birthday. When I joined in Goldman Sachs in 1994, we had 8,500 people. Today we have 40,000. We generate $36 billion of revenues, roughly, around the world. We're involved in every major financial market. And the interesting fact for you in the audience today, 10,000 of that 40,000 people at Goldman Sachs globally are engineers. 1 in 4 people at Goldman Sachs have a software or engineering connection. Big number. Closer to home, in Europe, London is probably the biggest center. We have about 6,000 people based in London. We have another several hundred, about 1,000 people based around in Europe. But the biggest center outside of London in Europe is your hometown of Warsaw. 6 years ago, we decided to set up here. Warsaw has become a center for engineering excellence in Goldman Sachs, the group. We have 40 nationalities here. We have 50 languages. And this is about my 10th trip to Warsaw over the last 3 years. Every time I come, I see an organization that is young, vibrant, growing, getting stickier in the global organization. And as I'll touch on a few projects that we're doing globally, every major project that Goldman Sachs is embarking on globally has people, teams working on it based in Warsaw. We have aspirations to be bigger. We want to be successful here. 700 people today, short term 1,000, but as I said to the team this morning in the office, for here the sky is the limit. And conferences like this really help us to get the talent to enable us to grow our organization. 40% of the campus in Warsaw, as in Europe, is diverse, women. We're not particularly happy with that number because while 40% may seem like a good number, it scales differently, higher at the junior levels, less at the senior levels. So we're very focused as an organization in growing the senior depth of our talent here. And Jo Hannaford, who is a senior partner in Europe and heads our technology division in Europe, I think is sitting over there, and she's out there and wants to meet a lot of you in the booth after. And Jo Obstroy, who is the senior woman in Warsaw, is also here today, as is Ate Lataranta, our recently hired Chief Technology Officer, who's flown in specially from New York to be here with you today. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about Goldman Sachs in terms of what we do and how we do it. We're a global investment banking organization. We're in every major market around the world. I don't have slides on who we are and what we do. www.gs.com or YouTube. There's a lot of technology that you can use to kind of find out more about us. Or we have a very shiny booth outside next door to Google, so you can find us there. If you're with Google, just hop next door and chat to us as well before you look too hard at Google. So Goldman Sachs in the last 12 to 15 months is undergoing kind of a period of rapid change. We have a new CEO. It's the 5th CEO that I've served under in my 25 years at Goldman Sachs. We have a new COO and we have a new CFO. Our businesses are changing. We've launched a new division. Previously, we used to say we had clients, we had counterparties, and now, uniquely, in the last 5 years, we have customers. We've set up a global bank brand called Marcus, which some of you may be familiar with. It's in the UK, it's quite big in the US. And in the last couple of months, we launched a credit card in the US with Apple. So a joint credit card with Apple that hopefully over time will expand. All of that software that was developed on those two projects, we had teams based here in Warsaw helping that project deliver. So moving on, being an Irishman, it would be remiss of me not to tell a couple of stories. I don't know if we have any Irish people in the crowd, but I wanted to talk a little bit about diversity, what diversity means for me, how it's shaped my career at Goldman Sachs, and my kind of 25 years journey at Goldman Sachs, and kind of echo some of the points that the panel made just after lunch and the earlier speakers. So I'm from a small town in Ireland, about 10,000 people. I had a rural upbringing. I went to a local university and I left Ireland when I graduated from university to go to London because it was economically depressed in Ireland at the time and I couldn't find work. So I headed off to London and got a graduate job in financial services. While I was in London, I met my girlfriend then, my wife now, and we've been together for 28 years. We've been married for 23. But sadly, we've only lived in the same country for 6. So stay with me on this one and I'll explain why. So my wife, back then girlfriend, was in New York. I was in London. Cross-distance relationships across the Atlantic Ocean don't work for a long time. So I quit my job. I followed her to New York. I was hunting around New York looking for work. My wife was doing she's a doctor and she was doing medical training in New York. And so I rocked up in New York, having met her 14 times, and said, here I am, can we spend the rest of our lives together? She said, well, you better get a job first and I'll see whether you're worth the risk. So I got a job interviewing at Goldman Sachs, and all my friends said, Goldman Sachs, wow, they'll never give you a job. There's no way you're going to get in there. So that set me a challenge. I went to the interview, came in, really nervous. Like, my perception of Goldman Sachs back then in '94 was a preppy, waspy East Coast Ivy League type institution, and wouldn't hire a small-time rural Irish guy. Anyway, it was a challenge for me. I got the job, and I've been still there for 25 years. So, '94 to '99, I stayed in New York. My wife was working in Columbia Presbyterian. I was working in Goldman Sachs. We both worked incredibly hard. We fed each other in terms of ambition and story. I witnessed firsthand the kind of diversity discrimination that my wife experienced while trying to gain in her profession. And we both were a source of kind of encouragement and inspiration for each other. '99, which, most people go through this in life, we had parental issues. And we needed to leave New York and come back to London. Goldman Sachs didn't want me to do it. They didn't want me to come back to London. My wife wanted to go home and look after her elderly parent. I said, well, if I can't move back to London, my wife is moving to Dublin. I'm going to leave Goldman Sachs and I don't want to do that. So they gave me a job in London. My wife moved to Dublin. She looked after her mum. She lived with us for 12 years. I came to London, had a job, and started my career again at Goldman Sachs in London, where I've been ever since. Over the course of that career in London, I've kind of had many different roles. I commuted back and forth to Dublin every weekend. We had a son who was born in 2003. And then life got quite complicated. Elderly parent, son, my wife working full-time in her career, me having a Goldman Sachs career. Somebody talked about workplace flexibility and how you juggle all the balls. And I guess the way I kind of thought about it, there is no such thing as workplace flexibility or work-life balance. All there is life. And every day you get up and you try and figure out what the priorities are and how you cope with it and how you get through it. So you're sitting there saying, why is Dermot telling me all this about his personal life? And the reason why I want to tell you about this is because I'm still at Goldman Sachs today, 25 years on, because of women. All my Goldman Sachs role models are women. For 15 years, I worked for a woman, Sarah Smith. She was the controller and chief accounting officer, a very senior woman at the firm, on the firm's management committee. She taught me FaceTime doesn't matter. She taught me it's all about the content. She would say, Dermot, I don't care where you are as long as I can call you on your cell. Content matters, yeah? Really important. And she taught me how to juggle personal demands and professional demands. Esther Stetcher, very, very senior woman, general counsel of Goldman Sachs. She's a mentor to me today. I WhatsApped her a photograph of the auditorium just before I came up, and I kind of said, I'm getting a little bit nervous, 10 minutes to kick off. And she just sent me a back big smiley face. She's been at Goldman Sachs 25 years. You walk into Esther's office in New York, she has a poster in her office. The caption reads, "Women who aspire to be like men lack ambition." That's a pretty cool statement, yeah? Yeah? Isabelle Ile, a French lady, another very senior lady, ran, and she's retired now, and is kind of doing a lot of non-for-profit stuff. But I used to work very closely with her. She had a very senior job in London. She was a former trader, grew up in France. And I like to go for her for the contrarian view, because I talked about my career. In 2007, I found the commute was getting a little bit tough for me. And the pressure on my wife of raising a young son, caring for an elderly parent, and pursuing a full-time career while your husband was gone Monday to Friday was getting a bit much for us. So I kind of decided to go back to Ireland, and everybody advised me, said I was nuts, you're ruining your career, it's not the right time, you're going to make partner at Goldman Sachs, you know, you need to stick around, yeah? And you have the perfect life, yeah? Family at the weekends, Monday to Friday, away from home. Who has it better than you? And then I went to Isabel and I said, well, what do you think I should do? She says, your family is more important than anything else. You need to go. You've built up a huge equity stake at Goldman Sachs in terms of your career. It doesn't work out, you always come back. Left, went home. 3 weeks later, I realized I'd made a horrible mistake. My wife realized I'd made a horrible mistake. She said to me, I'd rather have you 3 days happy than 7 days sad. Get back to London. So off I went to London, and I've been there for the last 10 years on quite a journey of projects, developing people, and, you know, what do I do now 25 years on at Goldman Sachs? I grow diversity. I'm passionate about diversity. I'm passionate about giving back. And I think Goldman Sachs is a much better institution because of diversity. I think there was the lady on the panel, she said, I don't want a company like Goldman Sachs to hire me because I wear a skirt. I want them to hire me because of my skills and my content. And that's really what it's all about. It's about content, opportunity, empowerment, ideas, and fresh thinking. And we're all better off for it. What else do I want to tell you? So I've had a lot of highs and lows in my career, and you know, a lot of people ask me internally at town halls and stuff like, what would you have changed? What would you change differently about your career? And you know, I've made a lot of mistakes. Liz Martin, who was here yesterday, she's a senior partner at Goldman Sachs in London. She runs our global electronic trading business, and we had a fireside chat last night, and she grew up as a trader, and she said, you know, as a trader, 50% of the time the stock goes up, 50% of the time stock goes down. So you're constantly used to failure, pulling yourself up and getting on with it. And I thought that was a really good statement. So I've made a lot of mistakes, I have a lot of regrets, but would I change anything? Absolutely not, because I'm here in front of you today. I'm very happy with where I am in my life and my career. And if you were to ask me 3 years ago, would I be in Poland with a Warsaw office of 700 people and growing, speaking to a large audience about diversity, I would say absolutely not. So I find all this stuff quite inspirational and uplifting, and I really want to help people succeed in their career. But I'd like to leave you with 2 little anecdotes about Goldman Sachs in terms of the change that we're trying to make in terms of diversity, opportunity, and empowerment. The first one is last week, which is, it's a bit, bear with me, it's a little bit corporate-y. Introducing new benefits and wellness programs to support you and your family planning needs. And I think this was talked about earlier from a couple of the ladies from the Nordics. All new parents, whether through birth, surrogacy, or adoption, will receive the same paid parenting leave time that applies to their office location regardless of gender or caregiver status. That's pretty big. Additionally, this new global parenting leave policy will be 20 weeks, an increase from 60 weeks in the US, Asia Pacific, and other locations. Pretty big. We're introducing a new program called Pathways to Parenthood, which increases existing stipends for adoption and surrogacy and introduces stipends for egg retrieval and egg donation where permitted by law. Pretty big. The firm is introducing 4 weeks of paid family leave care globally for you to care for family members as needed due to a serious health condition, military deployment, or foster placement. I could have done with that 4 weeks over the course of the last 15 years, but people have gone through it, they've experienced it, and now the firm is changing so it can give back. The last thing I'd like to touch on is, and this is for you to YouTube tonight when you go home, and it'll be top of the list. Google Analyst Impact Fund Days for Girls. Okay? Do one thing of that, right? And it's the second presentation in. It's done by, we have this program at Goldman Sachs. It's a global program. It happens every year. It's where analysts who are typically students 2 or 3 years out from college have the opportunity to make a pitch for a project that's charitable in nature. And if they win, they get $250,000 for that charity. And this is the 3rd time Europe has won it. And the presentation is really, really powerful. 2 girls and a guy did it. And the pitch is every girl, everywhere, period. And watch it. Tell me what you think. Dermot.McDonogh@gs.com. We have a booth outside. Ate is here. We want to meet you. We want you to join Goldman Sachs. Thanks for the time. Take care.